Good evening all. Please take your seats. Just to remind members about the film or recorded of the Council for Life or broadcast at a later time. I'm not going to read all of it. It's on your papers. And we move on to item 2, apologies for absence. Chief Whip.
Chief Executive.
Chief Executive. Chief Executive.
Apologies for absence have been received from the following councillors. Councillors Bevan, Hare, Davis, Emery, Demir, Carroll, Peacock, Williams, Mitchell, Say, James, Stone, Hearn, Diakides and Opoku.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declaration of interest. I'm not going to read it because I know you all have it in front of you. If you want me to read it, I will. No? Okay, thank you. And then we'll move to item 4. And this is to a request we received for deputation. And we're very happy to, are we happy to accept that, to agree? Excellent, thank you. Item 5. Yeah. Do you know, I've done this so many times for some strange reason tonight. I feel a bit nervous. Don't ask me why. I'd like to call Mr. Mikola Stoma. When you're ready, please, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. My name is Mikola Stoma. I'm a Lithuanian national, and I have come here today to speak in favour of the motion as a European Union citizen. The Brexit referendum took place shortly after I finished my university studies, at the time when I was still looking for work. With the results so close, with considerably less than half of all eligible electorate voting to leave the European Union, and most importantly, the referendum result being non-binding, initially I did not expect the government to pursue an exit from the European Union. Furthermore, with a large number of Leave voters expecting the country to maintain a favourable trading relationship with the economic bloc, I did not expect a so-called hard Brexit option to be on the table. In confidence that pragmatism would prevail, I chose to stay in the country. After more than 2 years, that confidence has all but disappeared. To this day, no agreement has been reached regarding the United Kingdom's future relationship with the European Union. The promises made by the Leave campaign have proved to be unfeasible, while the concerns of the Remain voting population have been largely shut out of the debate. Even though almost half of voters in the referendum voted to remain, and the recent poll suggests that the minority has become a majority, the most senior politicians in this country appear to be offering a choice between different types of hard Brexit. With no arrangements set in law and only promises made to EU nationals regarding the rights to remain after the end of March 2019, those eligible could consider becoming citizens of this country to resolve the uncertainty. However, after Brexit, this could entail forever losing the right to return to their country of origin or any other EU country. Germany, Spain, Netherlands, Slovakia, Lithuania, Estonia and Slovenia restrict their citizens' ability to retain their passports while acquiring another nationality, or ban multiple citizenship outright. Even those who could apply for citizenship or a document certifying their status as a permanent resident have found the process to be difficult, with many applications denied. Processing times have increased, and even an introduction of the government-proposed registration scheme would likely result in a backlog of millions of applications, leaving European Union citizens uncertain regarding their stay in the interim. Young childless professionals like myself, with a family home to come back to, can afford to live with a high degree of uncertainty and leave the country at the last minute, however disruptive it may be. It is not the case for the retired EU citizens who have built their whole lives in this country and need to be certain of the rights to access social care and medical services. Nor it is the case for families with young children whose life and education will be disrupted significantly should their European parents lose their rights to live and work in the UK. Even children with one EU parent live in fear of having their families separated. The referendum campaign, which focused on immigration, has coincided with a dramatic increase in recorded racially and religiously motivated hate crime around the UK, which has not returned to pre-referendum levels. It has affected not only people of continental European origin, but also other ethnic and religious minorities, LGBT community and disabled people. A hard Brexit, which is likely to result in lower budgets and even more stretched police resources, will only embolden those willing to commit violence against the different and vulnerable, which may encourage many hard-working residents afraid for their safety to leave the country. Yet immigrants from European Union member states form an important part of Haringey's economy. According to the ONS, the employment rate for European Union citizens is higher than ever, with 82% of those aged 16 to 64 thought to be in work across the UK. For Haringey, they are the payers of council tax, contributing to the provision of social housing and care services, helping support those in need. They are the customers of local businesses, whose tax payments are needed to sustain the local budget. They form a sizable part of the workforce, often educated at their country's expense, who end up becoming net contributors to the UK budget and over the lifetime exceeding the average contributions made by UK-born citizens. As an EU citizen living here in the UK, the Brexit vote was one of the most disappointing events of my life. However, it was still a great consolation that 75% of my neighbours here in Haringey had voted to remain and hence rejected the demonisation of fellow Europeans. I hope that tonight Haringey will once again do right by its EU citizens and that you, our councillors, will call for a people's vote that includes an option to end this Brexit nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stormer. Are there any questions from members? Yes. Palmer. Councillor Palmer. Sorry.
Thank you, Mikolai. Sorry. Thank you, Mikolai. I just wanted to ask you, of all the places in London, it's a great big city, and I'm not a local either, I'm from further away. I wondered what made you choose Haringey as the place where you've settled and why you want to live here.
Well, when I first came to London, I settled on the northern edge of Islington. However, within the next couple of months, I found myself training with a local running club. I found myself going to the local music venues, from small venues at the Green Lane to bigger places like Finsbury Park and Alexandra Palace. And within less than 6 months, I had to choose Wood Green, Haringey as my home, where I have stayed since. I thought I'd be moving across London every 6 months, but Haringey, I found it hard to leave.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Mohid. Yes.
Thank you, Mikolai, for taking the time to come and speak to us this evening. You mentioned the sharp increase in hate crime following the Brexit referendum. Perhaps you could touch on how that has affected your community, the Lithuanian community, and other European communities here in Haringey and in other parts of the UK. Thank you.
So, first of all, I'd like to stress we have all seen the news reports about Polish nationals being targeted, receiving hate mail, being attacked for speaking their home language. There is not enough statistics available to see how it has affected Lithuanians specifically. However, many of my friends and my colleagues have expressed unease at staying in the UK. They have become more cautious around ethnic English people, people who they used to call their close friends and who seem to have turned against them within the past 2 years.
Councillor Denison.
Mikolai, if you could say one thing to councillors here today that might be considering voting against this council supporting a people's vote, what would it be?
I would like to tell that member of the council that they are a member of Haringey Council, and Haringey Council overwhelmingly voted to remain. They would be losing their support as the councillor, as they would no longer represent their will. Thank you.
As I don't see any more members, may I ask? I can't see any members raising their hand to speak, so I call on the leader of the council to respond to the deputation.
I'd first and foremost like to thank you for coming here this evening. I think it's really important that you've spoken clearly here in this chamber, not just on behalf of yourself and people of your country, but on behalf of EU nationals, many of whom live within our borough. I understand between 40 and 50,000 live here, representing about a sixth of our population. It's really important that we hear your voice here in this chamber. And one of the things that we're all going to end up speaking about this evening is about how important we feel that the decisions that the national government are making on Brexit will be for the people of Haringey. We accept that the problems of the referendum and the fact that the government's preference for a hard Brexit will have many negative benefits for ordinary people. We accept that, and one of the things that we would like to do, I think on both sides of this House, is work for a way that doesn't actually happen. And Labour has set 6 tests for what Brexit ought to deliver, what we believe Brexit must deliver for the people and for this country. However, I've learnt from your statement that EU nationals might have to choose between being a citizen of their own country and a citizen of ours, and that clearly isn't fair. However, as a council, there are a finite amount of things that we can do about what happens nationally, and one of the things that I'd like to spend time here talking to you about is about what we are doing locally should we get to a situation where Brexit happens. I think, quite frankly, if anybody knows my particular view on this, I'm not. I voted Remain, just like 75% of my neighbours, right? And as a council, it's got to be clear that we need to be looking out for what our residents feel, whilst at the same time be doing what's best for our borough and for our country. Your words reflect the concerns that we've heard from many other communities across our borough. And I've already issued a public statement making it clear how much I value Haringey's EU residents. On behalf of me, on behalf of my neighbours, my friends, my family, other residents here in Haringey, all EU residents, we want you all to stay. We want you to continue making those great contributions to our borough that you've been doing for many, many years. We believe that this is your home, and I, as a leader of this council, and my cabinet and the councils on both sides will seek to do everything that we can to ensure that you're all supported to stay. Hear, hear. As I'm sure you're aware, however, that the government is proposing for all non-British EU residents to have to undertake a registration process to achieve settled status. As you pointed out, this might not be the best option, and it might mean choosing between home at home and home here at home, if you understand where we're going with this. Right. The Council, however, will shortly be communicating with all of our EU residents about the process, because we want to make that process as clear and as easy for everybody as possible. We'll be providing additional information and support for the more vulnerable residents, such as looked after children, rough sleepers, and those who might find it harder to find the documentation needed. One of the things that came out of the Windrush scandal earlier on this year is that many people don't have the documents that some of us might take for granted, stuck in a shoebox in the loft or whatever. But it's important that we as a council help those people who need the assistance to make sure that they have the necessary documentation to sort out their status. The reality is that no one is yet certain of the terms of our departure from the EU or the longer-term impacts on the wider borough and nation. We don't know exactly how Brexit will impact on you as EU residents. In fact, we don't know how Brexit will impact us as UK residents. But as a council, we're taking our responsibility to prepare seriously. Being well prepared will make us better able to protect all of our residents and our businesses from the negative impacts and changes of Brexit. We are undertaking work across a number of areas to make sure that we have looked at the potential impacts of Brexit, which means that we've done a lot more about this than our national government, who seem to have no idea what Brexit will actually do for this country. We're undertaking work across a number of areas to make sure that we have looked at the potential impacts. We're also preparing to respond quickly in the event of hate crime or public disturbance. We know that hate crime spiked following the referendum, and we are working closely with our neighbours across London to make sure that we are fully prepared for community cohesion issues or wider public disturbances, and we will be able to undertake wider contingency planning. Hate crime in Haringey will certainly not be tolerated. Hear, hear. We're also assessing and making preparations for potential workforce shortages. EU nationals are clearly a significant proportion of the workforce, as you pointed out, and they're also present in many key sectors. In construction, EU nationals are a third of London's construction workforce, and also nearly 1 in 5 of the social care sector in north central London. There's also a high proportion of those working in the growing fashion sector in our borough. They're also from the EU. Yet despite our efforts, we know that there's a risk that some of these workers may leave the UK and that fewer EU nationals will arrive to join these sectors. And we have to take a two-pronged approach. Supporting EU residents to stay...
May I ask you to wind up, please? Thank you.
Okay. So, in a few moments, supporting EU nationals to stay and enhancing training options for local people to develop their relevant skills. We believe, as a council, we will do everything we can to help EU nationals remain here, and we will still continue to lobby those who have the decisions to take in national government to ensure that there is, shall we say, as soft a Brexit as possible.
Thank you very much. That concludes this item. Please stay and, first of all, we should applaud our deputation. And I'd like to ask you to move to the gallery where you can observe the rest of the meeting. Thank you very much. Now, we come to item 5, and I'd like to ask the Leader of the Council to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't take up another 5 minutes of your time. This one's only 4.5. I'd like to invite you all to note the report which is attached, which summarises a number of the work streams which this Council has done to prepare for the UK's departure from the EU. We will increase our preparations as we move closer to March 2019 and as more guidance becomes available. And just within the report, which I hope that you'll note, there are 5 key work streams around procurement, around communications and engagement, workforce, contingency planning, and work with other partners in the borough, and also working with our cross-London partners in central government. I hope that you're able to note this report.
Is that great? Thank you. And then we move to item 6. This is the motion. And I'd like to ask Councillor Morris to propose her motion, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Usually as councillors, Our job is to attend to the ground level of politics and policy. We make sure bins are collected, buses run, and that vulnerable people get care. So treaties and trade deals may seem beyond our remit. Yet Brexit is not only a national and international issue, it is a local one too. A survey by the new local government network showed that council leaders across the country believe that Brexit will damage their economies, putting them under greater pressure to push up council taxes and cut yet more services. I would be surprised if the leader of this council didn't think the same. That is why the Lib Dems have called an extraordinary council meeting, as it's an accepted and important democratic process which allows elected representatives in Haringey to vote on the most critical issue currently facing our borough, our city and our country. And nothing is more critical today than Brexit. The countdown on Article 50 is due to run out in barely 6 months. The Council needs to be ready if that happens. Chequers, or whatever other deal the Tories concoct, would threaten the authorities' ability to recruit staff in key sectors like care and construction. That creates difficulties that the Council must prepare for. Not only by publishing its own Brexit contingency plan, but also challenging the government to keep local authorities better informed about the situation. But as well as trying to mitigate the impending disaster, we should also speak for our constituents' hopes for a break from the Brexit drama and an offer of a democratic vote that draws a curtain on this turbulent and divisive period. The belief that the people, not the politicians, should have the final say on Brexit has united people across the political spectrum. As you already know, the Lib Dems, along with our friends in the Green Party and the WEP, firmly support it. We're being joined by a growing number of rebel Conservatives, and of course the People's Vote campaign is led by a Labour MP and supported by many others, including 2 Labour MPs who represent this borough. Let's see if we can bring that spirit of cross-party unity to this chamber this evening and come together, all of us, to back a People's Vote. Do not be distracted by Labour's call for a general election, nationally or within the amendments they put forward this evening. As one David Lammy MP has observed, it won't happen. To quote The Independent, it would require Conservative and DUP MPs to play the role of turkeys voting for Christmas. Even if it happened, European citizens in the UK would be excluded. We must settle for nothing less than a people's vote in which all those impacted by Brexit can vote. We live in an age of political surprises, and we should not doubt our ability to win the British electorate over to the idea of Europe. During the 2016 referendum, we heard repeated arguments about how the single market was vital for the prosperity that underpins our public services. That's true, and that argument needs to be made again. But we also need to make a positive case for Europe, an EU that allowed me to live, study and work in France for 3 years. It was one of the best experiences of my life, and the right of free movement is one we must preserve for future generations. I realise, for Labour members, backing a people's vote is difficult, and that there is a lot of pressure to support your national leadership's preferred stance. But my fellow councillors, there are worse things than being out of step with your party. I don't imagine it was easy for Labour MPs who defied the whip to oppose the invasion of Iraq. But I'm sure they are the ones that you admire most. Please reject the tribal part of yourself and embrace your most courageous self. Stand up for what's right, reject the Tory Brexit that no one voted for, Support a people's vote by backing this motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Now I call on Councillor Da Costa to second the motion. You have 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, I second the motion and I reserve the right to speak.
Okay, thank you. As I understand, there is an amendment to the motion. I'd like to call the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, I can respect the sentiment behind the motion submitted by the party opposite. However, I wish to formally move an amendment to it. Labour's position is clear. Brexit should not make Britain poorer, less fair or less equal. Brexit is the biggest issue to face our country for a generation, and it has divided families. I have particular views about wishing to remain in the EU, which are clearly not shared by 51.9% of the electorate, and how we proceed will need to bring the wider public with us. Both Catherine West and David Lammy share the view of 75% of Haringey's residents. Britain's future is best within Europe. However, it's how we get there that's the issue. Some people blame austerity, but there was no single issue why Britain voted for Brexit. Not immigration, not the desire to spend more on the NHS, not striving for frictionless trade across the Irish border. Because these issues were never discussed during the referendum campaign. And there's no question it will affect our borough in a many range of ways. The future of a Tory Brexit or worse deal, a no-deal Brexit, worries me immensely. However, we are amending this motion because even if Brexit was stopped tomorrow, this council would still face significant financial pressures as a result of 8 years of centrally imposed austerity. This country needs a general election to sweep away Theresa May's dog being wagged by Jacob Rees-Mogg's tail. Get it away from government and have a government that will invest in our country for the many. Hence, we're also strengthening this motion in a number of key areas. We want Haringey to remain a welcome and diverse community, and we all know and we love it, where everyone, whatever their background, is welcome. And we want this council to mobilise to combat the rise in hate crimes and the far right, which have been emboldened by the Brexit vote. I will be taking on the Cabinet portfolio to ensure we are prepared for Brexit, building on the work that the council has already done. We are also setting up a Brexit working group and appointing EU citizens, an EU citizens ambassador, to address EU citizens' concerns over their future rights and rights to work here in the UK. Council, it is really important that we take firm and decisive action and have a clear view about what's in the best interest of Britain as well as the best interest of Haringey and Haringey's residents. So, Council, I ask you to support this amendment.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Das Neves to second the amendment.
Madam Chair, I second this amendment to the motion as the daughter of 2 economic migrants to this country, 2 EU citizens, one of whom has lived in this country since she was 18 years old. They have worked and strived and struggled and thrived. And now we have Brexit. And they wonder what's happening. And they wonder what the future holds. Door knocking not long ago, I spoke to a Polish woman whose husband has leukemia and is receiving services through the NHS. And she wonders, will he still have the same entitlements that he has now? Will he still have the same care he has now? And I spoke to 2 Italian women on the street in my ward who've lived here most of their lives and who wonder what their pensions will look like and what their pensioners' future will look like post-Brexit. Like the thousands of Haringey EU citizens, they have many questions and no answers. But I'll tell you one thing, Madam Mayor, that they do know about. They know about the rise of racism and xenophobia all around them. Send all the foreigners back, said one man to me not long ago in the street in my ward. And while Theresa May writes and rewrites her Brexit, in the meantime, here in Haringey, our community suffers at the hands of austerity, homelessness on the up, poverty, in-work poverty on the up, crime on the up, inequality on the up. Brought to you by a coalition government and further implemented with vigour by the Tories. And what is our response here in this borough, in this administration? We say no to a hard Brexit and no to no deal. We say no to austerity that is strangling our community. We say no to racism, to xenophobia and to the hostile environment. And above all, we say no to the far right and we say no to their extremism. Instead, we say yes to a full guarantee of EU citizens' rights. Yes to keeping all options on the table, including the people's vote. Yes to an end to austerity and to universal credit. Yes to enlivening the British economy and to investment in our community. Above all, we say yes to solidarity with EU citizens, with workers and our unions, and our diverse and culturally rich community, in a way that only a Labour administration can talk about solidarity. And we look forward to a general election, after which Labour will rebalance the mess given to us by our Liberal Democrat and by our Tory politicians.
Thank you, Councillor. We now have the debate. Members may have up to 3 minutes for their contributions. I have a list of members that wish to speak. The first one is Councillor Rossetti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason we are all here tonight is because we are seriously concerned about Brexit, this story Brexit. If there is one thing that I learned from Brexit, is that we cannot just let history pass us by and hope for the best. We need to speak up. We have to be the voice for the thousands in Haringey that voted to remain and elected us to office just a few months ago. We must show that we listen to, understand and share the concern about how Brexit will affect them and give voice to the EU citizens that, like me, could not vote in the Brexit referendum because this council chamber is the only political body we are allowed to elect to represent us and must show that we are ready to do more for them than help filling in a settled status form or appoint a EU citizen ambassador. For all of us, Brexit means uncertainty in our consumers' and workers' rights, impact on our social care, reduced opportunities to education, work experience abroad and social mobility, reduced access to medical and scientific research, increased cost to board a plane or a train for a trip away or to visit friends and family, and a reduced diversity of food, people and lifestyles that make this country so great for so many. This is quality of life, day-to-day life. And this is what is also our responsibility as a councillor to defend, and we must show that we can. The final decision, the initial decision, has been with the people, and the final one should be too. This is the only way to ensure that there will be no doubt and no resentment of what both Leavers and Remainers meant with their vote. A mandate for a government is not a mandate on Brexit. Brexit goes beyond the current government and the next one. It is our present and our future, and it should only be about what is best for the country. Let's make no mistake, the Labour amendment to our motion is calling for a general election. It is not calling for a people's vote. And to be clear, the amendment is endorsing a Tory Brexit. This is not what Haringey voted for or are calling for. Labour voting this evening to support a Tory Brexit is not what is best for Haringey. What is best for Haringey is a people's vote. I therefore call on all elected members of the Chamber to support our motion unamended and show that we are the voice for all EU citizens and all EU residents, including British citizens. Haringey deserves better, and we demand better.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I call on Councillor Moyet.
Madam Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to make my maiden speech as a councillor in this chamber. And I'll be speaking in support of Labour's amendment to the Brexit motion tabled by Lib Dems. There are many glaring omissions in the Lib Dem motion. Where to begin, really? But given the shortage of time, I'm going to focus on their complete failure to talk about the rise in hate crime experienced by EU citizens in Brexit Britain, something that Nikolai touched on earlier. Police have reported that there's been a 41% rise in hate crime since the Brexit referendum. We've seen the rise of fascists, neo-Nazis and racists who have been emboldened by the Brexit vote. They have been giving Nazi salutes on our streets. And it's grassroots Labour members, councillors, MPs, along with the wider community who have been mobilising against the rise of the far right. We have a proud tradition of standing up to the fascists in Haringey. 41 years ago, at the Battle of Wood Green, it was Haringey councillors from across the political divide, including a certain Jeremy Corbyn, who came together with the wider community and resisted the National Front, who had threatened to march in our area. People of Haringey said to the fascists, these are our streets, and you do not belong here. We are faced with the same threat in Brexit Britain today, and it is Labour that's taking action to see off that threat. On the 14th of July, after the demonstration against the world's #1 racist, Donald Trump, we had a march in Whitehall against Britain's #1 racist, Tommy Robinson, and his neo-Nazi supporters. A large contingency of my Labour councillor colleagues were on that march. There was no Haringey Lib Dem councillor on site. I spoke at that march with anti-racist campaigners from across Europe. There was not a single Lib Dem speaker on that stage. Lib Dems, they seem to be strong on rhetoric, but they're desperately found wanting when it comes to taking action. And my message to Lib Dem colleagues, you will be judged not by your words or your YouTube videos, but by your action. EU citizens will ask you, what have you done to fight racism off our streets? And this is what you can do. Please note these dates in your diary. This Saturday, on the 13th of October, there will be a march against the so-called Democratic Football Lads Alliance outside Parliament. And Haringey Labour Party have 2 meeting points, outside Seven Sisters Tube Station, outside Finsbury Park Tube Station at 12 p.m. And I'm sure you will be welcome with open arms if you were to join us. On Sunday,
Councillor, may I ask you to wind up, please?
Okay. I don't see any of the Lib Dems taking note on these concrete actions that you can actually take. And I want to end this part of my speech by commending the Leader of the Council on his Brexit commitment to EU residents yesterday. And I quote when he said, "You are welcome here now and will remain welcome here in the future." I call on you to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I remind the members that not to speak more than 3 minutes? I'm trying to be tolerant, but Councillor Barnes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now let me be clear. The Labour amendment is a wrecking amendment. It is designed to frustrate a people's vote and enable Brexit. It strips out any reference to a people's vote with an option to remain. It says that if we have a general election, that's enough. If a Brexiteer like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister with just 40% of the vote, then they have carte blanche to choose their favoured Brexit. And the Remain majority that polls are now showing will just have to lump it. Theresa May said, Brexit is Brexit, and she's right. Whether it's a Tory Brexit or a Labour Brexit, it still equals the same thing. And yes, St Jezza of Islington is as much a Brexiteer as Mogg. He admits he voted to leave in the 1975 referendum. He voted against Maastricht and Lisbon. He voted against the creation of a European diplomatic service and against amendments designed to keep the UK in the single market. He signed off on a 2017 Labour manifesto that specifically promised to end the freedom of movement. He voted for triggering Article 50 and criticised the Dancing Queen for not doing it fast enough. Indeed. He called for it to be triggered on the night of the referendum. And if that had happened, we'd already be out of the European Union. Most remarkably, in 2011, he was one of the few MPs who voted for a referendum on British membership of the European Union. As Miliband, Cameron and Clegg voted no, let me tell you some of the characters that Corbyn went through the division lobby with. John Redwood, Bill Cash, Ian Paisley and Jacob Rees-Mogg. Yet Labour's amendment wants a general election to make this hard Brexiteer the Prime Minister. Or I think that's what they've tried to do. But if you read their new Council Resolves 1, it says we would only call for a general election if Theresa May doesn't get a deal or can't get it through the Commons. If she can, however bad that deal is, the amendment says she can go ahead. So we have an amendment put forward by the Labour councillors in the 5th most Remain area in the UK that says our preferred option is for Theresa May to get the deal we have spent most of the Council Believes section trashing. Then the fallback is a general election. Remember, Brexit is Brexit. And then if that's not possible, who knows? All the options are open and we might just think about a public vote then. But it won't necessarily include an option to remain. Madam Mayor, this is not the position of progressive Remainers. This is an amendment that tacitly backs a Tory Brexit, and we must oppose it.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a point of order, if I may. Councillor Barnes has just referred to the Labour amendment being a wrecking amendment. Can I get clarification from the monitoring officer? My understanding, if a member makes that sort of suggestion, then it's down to the monitoring officer to make a ruling, because we've put in an amendment. If it was a wrecking amendment, then under the Constitution, the monitoring officer would have ruled it out of order. So can I ask the monitoring officer to clarify the position, please? Thank you.
It's allowed under the Constitution, obviously, the amendment, otherwise I wouldn't have accepted it.
Okay, we move on. Councillor Carlin, please.
Madam Mayor, I did not expect to make my maiden speech on Brexit, notwithstanding its central importance to all our policies and concerns. We all know how damaging a hard Brexit will be, both socially and economically, not just here in Haringey, but across the UK. However, there is something particularly ironic in the party opposite bringing this motion to full council, given that they are directly responsible for the Brexit vote. Those who voted to leave the European Union did not just do so because they were manipulated by a campaign that broke the rules on spending. They did not decide that they wanted to change the status quo during the very short campaign. They did not even, most of them, vote to leave the EU because of a concern about immigration per se. When a map of the areas that voted for Brexit is overlaid with a map of the areas most hit by the Tory Liberal Democrat austerity cuts, the areas match up exactly. It was the Liberal Democrats, as part of the coalition government, that oversaw the dismantling of the welfare state, the fracturing of the NHS, and the deep austerity cuts that have decimated our public services and local government funding. When asked why they voted for Brexit, a substantial number did so because of pressure on homes, on schools, and on our NHS. They unfortunately believed that leaving the European Union would produce a financial dividend to allow our services to be better funded. But, of course, these services were deliberately cut for ideological reasons. It did not help our public finances. We have bumped along with anemic growth and public debt has soared, while ordinary working people struggle and need food banks to get by. And that is why a people's vote, despite being so beguiling, it is also so risky. And why we need an election and an anti-austerity Labour government in order to address the reasons why people voted to leave the EU. Because without that, there is a very real risk that a further vote may simply reinforce the first and unleash further xenophobia and hatred.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. On time as well. Well done. I call on Councillor Palmer, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A story from a well-known MP recalls a conversation that he had with a constituent in the run-up to the referendum. And he said, "I hope you're voting Remain." And his constituent replied, "Why on earth would I vote for things to stay the same? Actually, my life just isn't great, and I want a better future for me and for my family." And it is really fair to say that there are a lot of people who saw little hope that life would become fairer for them. And actually, that has been happening for decades, rather than the last 8 years. And so the referendum really was a chance to make their voices heard. So I'm in no doubt that the individual that I mentioned genuinely did think he was voting for 350 million extra funding a week for the NHS, that he believed he would have more money in his pocket, more job opportunities for him and his children. Perhaps he was concerned about immigration and believed the many stories that were told about the impact of migrants in the UK. It's now widely acknowledged that the campaign to leave was based on empty promises and, at worst, outright lies. There's actually probably more truth in Finding Nemo than there ever was in anything the Leave campaign spoke of. So I wonder now if anyone would look that individual in the eye and promise him that Brexit will enable a better and wealthier future for him and his family. And I would say if they did, they were lying. And quite frankly, we have had enough of the lies that the Leave campaign broke the law to spread. And that is a fact proven by the Electoral Commission, and which those appointed to deliver Brexit have perpetuated. So what we're now hearing is the truth. And it is a harsh and unpleasant reality, and it does mean everyday working people will be worse off. Food prices are increasing, jobs are already being lost, and there are more and more businesses planning to leave the UK. The Labour amendment before us today does nothing to improve the mess that we are in. In fact, most of what the amendment does is to remove references for the widespread support of a people's vote. And that includes support from the 2 Haringey Labour MPs, a number of trade unions, as well as the Mayor of London. And honestly, never did we expect the Labour Council to be so embarrassed of their own comrades' bravery in fighting this Tory Brexit. If they can't trust each other, then this alone shows that we cannot trust a word that Haringey Labour say when it comes to standing up against a disastrous Tory Brexit. So I urge you, reject this amendment and support the motion as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor. Again on time. Well done. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak tonight as one of Tottenham's most active campaigners for Remain during the 2016 referendum. In May and June 2016, I was out knocking on doors almost every day to get the vote out. So I speak not only as a Remainer, but as someone who put in more effort than most to try to get what I still think would have been the right result. But we didn't get that result, and we now face the chaos of a Tory Brexit as Theresa May desperately scrambles to cling on for as long as she can to office, we can hardly call it power, while her colleagues battle to succeed her, and our residents, 1/5 of whom are EU citizens, wonder what Brexit will do to their livelihoods, their families, or even their right to stay in their homes and jobs. But it's a fantasy to suggest that the mess we're in can be fixed by holding a so-called people's vote. Calling it a people's vote is an attempt to trick those who voted leave by trying to make it look like something other than what it is, an attempt to reverse the result of the 2016 referendum. And of course, the vote would be administered by the current Tory government, whose record in this area is not good. The 2016 referendum came not from a principled decision to let the people decide, but from David Cameron's wish to protect his own position from his enemies within his own party, and his overconfidence that a vote to leave the EU was inconceivable. Nobody anticipated the result. Not Cameron, not Nigel Farage, who conceded defeat as soon as polls had closed, not Boris Johnson, who only campaigned for leave to boost his own career prospects, and not any of the Leave campaigners I spoke to during the referendum campaign, who all insisted that they didn't need to think about what a vote to leave would mean in practice, as it wasn't going to happen. Who knows where a Tory-run people's vote would take us? Almost certainly not where those who are arguing for it think. And let's not forget the conditions that led to the result we got. We are where we are now because the Tories' Lib Dem enablers propped up Cameron's government for 5 years as it implemented the very austerity policies that have destroyed the economy of our towns and cities and led to the people feeling so abandoned by the system that they voted for change, any change, just to shake things up. A Tory Brexit won't provide the change Britain needs, and nor will a people's vote. But real change is coming, with Labour's transformational policies that will rebuild Britain for the many, not the few. And to make that happen, what we need is a general election. For this Council to waste time and money campaigning for another referendum on the EU would be criminal. The negative consequences of Tory Brexit would fall most heavily on Haringey's poorest residents and on our 54,000 EU nationals. So I am happy to support the proposed amendment, which, as well as calling for a general election, pledges to give a Cabinet member responsibility for ensuring we are adequately prepared for any result, and to create a Brexit working group and appoint an EU citizen ambassador. It's practical steps like these, rather than empty gestures like raising flags, that will make sure Haringey is prepared for any outcome until we get the change we all need.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I call Councillor Dan Costa.
Madam Mayor, I hope I'll be able to keep to time like most of the speakers. I want to take the opportunity in my maiden speech to respond to some of the things that people have raised. Thank you. Finally get to speak. I didn't get to speak at the last council meeting. Without a doubt, a people's vote with a deal to remain is becoming increasingly the demand of people all over this country. People even in leave voting areas, people who voted for leave, are changing their mind. Now, I want to take an opportunity to quote David Davis, surprisingly, which is, a democracy is not a democracy if it cannot change its mind. Furthermore, David Davis said that a referendum can only be held if it's held on rigorous terms, if all the facts are out there and everyone knows what is happening. The fact is, if we hold a people's vote with a choice to remain, that gives people now the opportunity to see how bad any type of Brexit is. Not just a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit or a medium Brexit or a Canada plus option, We actually need to let people have the opportunity to say, we want to stop this Brexit and stay part of the European Union. And I don't see that the Tories or a Corbyn government will deliver that, given the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was saying we should trigger Article 50 at the same time as Nigel Farage, immediately after the referendum result was announced. And MacDonald himself said that we should not frustrate Brexit. Article 50 needs to be triggered in Parliament, and Labour will not seek to block or delay. It is time we were more positive about Brexit. Well, Council and Madam Mayor, Haringey is not positive about Brexit. Haringey is not positive about leaving the European Union, which has been our partner for so very long. And therefore, fellow councillors, I urge you to vote for the motion. I'm actually going to go under time here, but I urge you to vote for the motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I call on Councillor Jockey, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I have to say I'll take no lectures. I think anyone on the Labour bench will take lections from the Liberal Democrats about backing the Tories and quoting them. Shame on the lot of you. Madam Mayor, I've started every speech in this chamber since my election in 2014 with words of thanks and gratitude, and usually of a positive nature too. One colleague from the member for Muswell Hill noted earlier on that I should calm down, but I'm not going to calm down because this is too important an issue to calm down. I regret that we are here this evening, not least because I had to cancel meeting residents to take part in this charade. But importantly, let me finish, please. Let me finish. I was elected by thousands of people. Because I don't believe anything good can possibly come from the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. I regret the fact that the British people voted to leave the European Union. I'm firmly of the view that the austerity agenda of the coalition and now this majority Tory government has much to do with why people voted to leave the European Union. And there are people sitting in this council chamber who campaigned for the re-election of that coalition government in 2015. How they could, I will never know. I regret the fact too that we have a Tory government in cahoots with the DUP, leading our negotiations with the European Union. I say in cahoots, Madam Mayor, but who knows the state of the current agreement? This could turn out to be a very expensive £1 billion deal for Mrs May. I regret too the 2008 campaign led by Nick Clegg calling for a referendum on our EU membership. Now, I voted for Diane Abbott. I declare an interest in the 2010 Labour leadership election. But thank God Ed Miliband had the good sense to call out the Liberals for the dangerous suggestion that we should have a referendum. Look where we are now. I don't like referendums and believe that they should not be used to decide and set the constitutional, economic and political futures of nation-states. My views, Madam Mayor, on Europe are well known. I'm fiercely and proudly European and always will be. I don't believe that issues of conscience should be whipped by any party, and I don't believe issues like this should be used for party political games. I say to the people of Hornsey that I remain of the view that the British people should have a say on the deal the Tory PM takes to Parliament, and that I'm pleased that Labour is now committed to ensuring that nothing is off the table. I say to them that I was proud to run a spirited, effective, passionate and loud campaign to remain. Ellen and I were running around the Campsbourne 5 to 10 at night getting every vote we could get out possible. And I also am proud to campaign against proud European stalwarts like our former colleague Liz McShane, who I paid tribute tonight for her work. And I will always stand up for the cherished European values of togetherness, solidarity, decency, respect and understanding. Madam Mayor, I wonder when the opposition will stop playing games, though, trying to catch the Labour Party out and trying to be all things to all men, women, children, cats and dogs. It doesn't work and the people don't like it. That's why... Hold a second. I was elected to serve the people. I've got a mandate and I want to speak up for them, if you don't mind. That's why the Liberals called for the referendum in the first place. That's why Vince Cable and Tim Farron didn't turn up to vote on Brexit legislation. That's why the 8 Lib Dem MPs at the time voted 3 different ways on whether we should trigger Article 50. And that's why we're in the mess we're in today. We should be taking this issue seriously, Madam Mayor. I want to know how many times the Leader of the Opposition has emailed the Council Leader about the UK leaving the European Union, how many times she has sought meetings with the Chief Executive to discuss the same, how many questions the Liberals have tabled on Europe to be discussed at full Council meetings. I fear this would have been handled very differently and at a much lower cost if the Opposition was serious about us playing our part and working together. I say to all those in this chamber and beyond, in the words of Manuel Cortés, that capitalism won't end on the 29th of March.
Can you wind up, please?
I am, Madam Mayor, don't you worry. That ideology and dogma will not deliver solutions to the problems our people face, and that leaving the European Union will do nothing to create jobs, increase wages, or deliver wealth and prosperity to those who need it most. And I pay tribute to all those EU nationals we heard from on this evening who live in our borough. We should be proud of them, and we should reiterate tonight that we welcome them. And I note the contribution of them all, including the 20% of EU nationals who live in St Anne's Ward, through to Hornsey and beyond. I welcome the leader's commitment to appointing... Madam Mayor, 2 seconds, almost finished.
No, can you please finish?
I welcome... I thought you believed in democracy. I got more votes than half of you put together. I got more votes than half of you put together.
Could you please...
Madam Mayor,
please,
I welcome...
Could you calm down?
I welcome...
Can I ask Councillor just a last sentence and you finish?
Thank you. I welcome the commitment to appointing an EU champion, and I look forward to the leader taking responsibility for leading on Haringey's preparations ahead of March the 29th. It should be no other way and no other member, no matter how large the ego. And last sentence, Madam Mayor, there's a semicolon. There's a semicolon. I would like to pay tribute to Catherine West, the MP for Hornsey and Green. She stands up for us, our area and our community, and has been brilliant on issues relating to the UK leaving the European Union. And I thank her for her leadership.
Okay, thank you very much. We come to the end of the debate. Now I will ask Councillor Morris to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank all the speakers for their contributions this evening. However, I cannot help feeling that it is a very sad day for this borough. The Labour group have butchered a motion calling for the people's vote. But at least the Lib Dems have managed to stir the council into some sort of action on Brexit contingencies and advocating for the rights of EU citizens. Labour councillors have failed to take the stance that is true to this borough's diversity and global connections. Instead, they've submitted an incoherent fudge of ifs and buts, the result of which is that Labour are actually supporting whatever Brexit deal Theresa May negotiates. We cannot possibly support the amended motion that clearly rejects a people's vote in virtually every scenario. It is disappointing that Haringey Labour have not joined the fight against Brexit and will not add this council's voice to the chorus calling for a people's vote. I'm ignoring you. However, the Lib Dems will continue to push for a people's vote. It was heartening to see our supporters advocating for a people's vote at the rally this evening. Their voices and the voices of millions more people up and down the country will continue to be heard. A Britain that is part of a peaceful, prosperous and progressive Europe is still possible, and the Liberal Democrats will champion that to the very end.
Okay, thank you. Now we will vote on the amendment.
Madam Mayor, can we have a name vote, please?
A name vote is being called. Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay, over to you.
So we are voting on the amendment. Councillors, when I say your name, if you could indicate which way you are voting, then we will record it. If I inadvertently call the name of a member who's absent, I'd be grateful if you could remind me that that member is absent. Councillor Adamu. So just a reminder that you can vote yes, no or abstain. So Councillor Adamu.
I'm voting for the amendment.
Councillor Ajay. Councillor Ahmet. Councillor Amin. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Basu. Councillor Berryman. Councillor Bevan is absent, I believe. Councillor Barbara Blake. Councillor Mark Blake. Councillor Brabazon. Councillor Bull. Councillor Carlin. Councillor Carroll is absent, I believe. Councillor Corley-Harrison. Councillor Shennow. Councillor Chirian Candeth. Councillor Connor. Councillor Culverwell. Councillor Da Costa. Councillor Das Neves. Councillor Davis is absent, I think. Councillor Demir. Councillor Dennison. Councillor Diocledes is absent. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Dogan. Councillor Ejiofor. Councillor Emery. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Guneff. Councillor Hakata. Councillor Hare. Councillor Hearn is absent. Councillor Hinchcliffe. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor James is absent. Councillor Jogi. Councillor Mitchell is absent. Councillor Morris. Councillor Moyeed. Councillor Ogyahor. Councillor Opoku is absent. Councillor Ossamore. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Rice. Councillor Rice. Sorry. Councillor Ross. Councillor Rossetti. Councillor Say is absent. Councillor Stennett. Councillor Stone is absent, I think. Yeah. Councillor Tavois. Councillor Tucker. Councillor Weston. Councillor White. And Councillor Williams, I believe, is absent.
The amendment is carried.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to the new substantive as per paragraph 1512B of Part 4 of the Council Rules of Procedure under the Council Constitution. It's clear from the referendum result in 2016 that Haringey overwhelmingly voted to remain in the EU and did not vote for a Tory or Labour Brexit. They did not vote for another general election, and therefore I would like to amend the substantive motion as follows. To remove the entire section entitled Council believes in light of this, so that the section Council resolves immediately follows paragraph 11 of Council believes. In the section entitled Council resolves on page 2 in paragraph 1, to remove the calls for a general election and replace with the call for a people's vote, so that the paragraph reads, to support the call for a people's vote on any final Brexit deal with an option to remain in the EU. In paragraph 2, to remove the call for a general election and replace with a call for a people's vote, so that the paragraph reads, that in order to exert pressure for a desirable outcome in Parliament, it will ask the Leader of the Council to write to the Leader of every party represented in the House of Commons, asking them to support a call for a people's vote, or, where appropriate, thanking them for already doing so. I have a written copy.
All right, okay.
Can I take a point of order on that, Chair? Madam Mayor, we had a conversation a little while earlier about a Reckon amendment. Now, since the amendment is now substantive, surely the amended amendment put forward by the gentleman opposite should be considered a Reckon amendment to what is now the substantive.
I'd like to ask the officers for some advice. Give us a couple of minutes.
Madam Mayor, if an amendment is carried as this one is, the motion as amended takes the place of the original motion. So that becomes the substantive motion to which further amendments are moved. So it is possible to move further amendment. That is allowed under the Constitution without notice at the meeting.
Just hang on. Point of order, yes?
So the point of order that I was raised was not whether or not it's possible to amend the amendment, it was whether or not the content of the amendment should be considered a wrecking motion, since it takes a substantial part of what the new substantive is away from what it says.
No, it does. I don't consider it to be a wrecking amendment. I mean, if you look at Rule 15.8 on amendments to motions, it is a very wide amendment, provided you don't negate the motion completely, so it's allowed under the Constitution.
Okay, can I ask members now to vote on the second amendment? Those in... Sorry? It's a name vote again. Okay.
You're voting on the second amendment put forward by the Lib Dem group, which in essence is an amendment to the original motion as amended by the Labour motion. So the substantive motion now is the Labour motion, and this is a proposal to amend it, and you're voting on that.
Right, councillors, I will do the same as we've just done. Again, my apologies, I didn't note down on my list councillors who I didn't have as absent, so I'm sorry, there'll be some repetition. Councillor Adamu.
Against.
Councillor Ajay. Councillor Ahmet. Councillor Amen.
Against.
Councillor Barnes. Councillor Basu. Councillor Berryman. Councillor Barbara Blake. Councillor Mark Blake. Councillor Brabazon. Councillor Bull. Councillor Carlin. Councillor Corley Harrison. Councillor Sheno. Councillor Chiriankanda. Councillor Connor. Councillor Culverwell. Councillor Da Costa. Councillor Das Neves. Councillor Demir. Sorry. Councillor Dennison. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Dogan. Councillor Ejiofor. Councillor Emery. Councillor Gordon. Councillor Guinness. Councillor Hakata. Councillor Hare is absent. Councillor Hinchcliffe. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Jogi. Councillor Morris. Councillor Moyed. Councillor Ogiahor. Councillor Ossamore. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Rice. Councillor Ross. Councillor Rossetti. Councillor Stennett. Councillor Tabwa. Councillor Tucker. Councillor Weston. Councillor White.
The second amendment is lost. The officer would clarify what we are about to vote.
If I can, the first amendment is not carried. We will proceed to vote on the first amended motion on the substantive motion, i.e. the Labour amendment.
All those in favour, please show by raising your hand. Okay. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? I don't think there are any. No? Thank you very much. The motion is being carried. The Labour motion is being carried. Thank you for your attendance. We close. We finish now.